Hello and welcome back to Salmon's Pizzeria. Today is the latest edition of The View from the Stands, and I'm joined by a very special guest, which just so happens to be Gary from the ABZ Podcast, and he is here to talk all things Aberdeen. Gary, how are you?
Yeah, good, Alex. Thanks for having us.
No, more than delighted to have you on. So yeah, we'll talk a little bit about last season before we get into this season's hopes and prayers, which I'm sure there will be a few of in the Northeast after a pretty dismal season last season. So yeah, let's just get into it, and we'll start with Barry Robson's team. You end up in the League Cup final, a Scottish Cup semi-final, and in the bottom six. I mean, you're eighth with the pre-split, just 35 points from 33 games. It's not really good enough, is it, for Aberdeen standards? I mean, a cup run is always great, but in the end, there isn't any silverware to kind of mention. And yeah, a bottom six finish means, of course, no European football.
Yeah, I mean, I think as you touched on, a lot of people at the club will probably point towards like the cup runs as being a sign of a successful season to a certain extent. I think though, ultimately, for me, and I think for a lot of Aberdeen fans, if you support Aberdeen, an expectation for us is with the budget that we have, we should be in semi-finals regularly anyway. I mean, okay, you might get the occasion, you might get the cup draw, which is unfortunate for you. You draw maybe, one of the Old Firm, or you draw like a Hearts away or something. But generally speaking, we should be making at least the last four of the League Cup and the Scottish Cup, I think, pretty consistently. I'm also one of those supporters that, yeah, it's great to get to final, but getting to final doesn't mean anything unless you win it. You get the same prize pot for getting knocked out in the group stage as the League Cup as you do for getting to the final and getting beat in the final. So, okay, there's the financial piece, which is good. What was disappointing, I think, about the League Cup final in particular is we just didn't really show up on the day. I don't think we really gave ourselves a chance to win a game that I think was winnable for us at the time. So that was disappointing. The Scottish Cup run was decent enough, which was good, obviously, because we had the Darvel debacle the season before. So making it to Hampden was good. And, I thought we were unfortunate in that semi-final, which was a rip-roaring game, I think, for the neutral to watch. So the Cups, yeah, fine, probably did about what you'd probably expect from a budget perspective. The league campaign, though, was just absolutely horrendous. And as you touched on, ultimately finishing, best of the bottom six, fine. But our run towards the split was pretty poor, certainly under Warnock, until Peter Leven came in and steadied the ship a bit. So yeah, all round, I think a really, really disappointing season from our perspective, because we went into the season with such high hopes, having finished the season prior in such a phenomenal manner to get ourselves into Europe. I guess the big positive from last season was the European campaign as a supporter more than anything else. Again, I think we put in some good performances in Europe. I don't think I think we flew the flag for Scotland pretty well in that campaign. We held our own against Eintracht Frankfurt in Germany, beat them at home. Picked up a really credible 2-2 draw, I think, in Greece against PAOK. We should have beaten them at Pataudry if it wasn't for a mad few minutes. And we should have beaten Helsinki in both the games we played against them as well, just never really got the job done. So we performed well in Europe, but at the same time, I think we maybe underperformed from a points perspective and wins. I think we actually possibly could have maybe got out of the group if we'd just been a little bit more clinical. And that's a little bit of a disappointment as well. But yeah, all in all, last season was certainly one to try and forget.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned that, because obviously that last season's domestic results mean that this season you are without European football, and it was a kind of so close, but not enough for Aberdeen, and the performances in the big games like Eintracht Frankfurt, where you really, really showed up, and it was the kind of Helsinki and PAOK games which in the end let you down in terms of there probably was a space for you to get out of that group. But no European football this season. I mean, first of all, means that you have Premier Sports group stage games to play. You come through those with flying colours. But do you think as well it might mean that the domestic focus can just be a little bit more fine-tuned, because you've not got these distractions midweek? Because we do see a lot of Scottish teams kind of put everything into a Thursday night and then on a Sunday have nothing left to give.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. I think for us this season, it's probably a blessing in disguise we don't have European football. I think it gives, if you think about just the way the calendar works, you'd have had Jimmy Thelin coming into a new job, and having to really try and get off and running in Europe. And it's, depending on where we would have sat in the league, if let's just say for argument's sake, we'd sat in Kilmarnock or St Mirren's pot where they are at the moment, you're very quickly up against decent sides. Kilmarnock against Cercle Bruges, obviously, and then St Mirren last night up against SK Brann. You can very quickly get off to a bad start from that perspective. Like we saw it last season with the Europa League playoff round against Häcken, where got a good result in Sweden, but we were really poor second leg. And you could start to see pressure. We're starting to build on Barry Robson already at that point. So for Thelin, I think in a way, not having European football this year is probably a good thing for us. It's meant he's able to get off and running in the League Cup group stages, kind of treat it like pre-season, but with a competitive edge. Gets off and running there, 4 wins from 4. And that put us in a really good shape, I think, going into the game that we just had on Monday night against Johnston. So I think for where we were at as a club and with everything that's been happening in the summer and with the new manager in charge, probably not being in Europe is not the worst thing for us.
Yeah, and as you mentioned there, Jimmy Thelin comes in from Sweden, from Elfsborg, and he's the new Aberdeen manager. Just talk us through. I mean, it's only been kind of a little showcase so far, but what you've seen and expect from his style, because it's a goal scoring one. I mean, in the group stage, you score 15, but yet you only concede once. So, albeit like you say, it's kind of a glorified friendly tournament for this stage, anyways, for Premiership clubs. It's good to kind of showcase what's up and coming this season.
Yeah, I think so. I think people need to remember as well that the Thelin piece was quite, it dragged out for quite a while. Obviously, when Barry Robson departed, we had the hilarious Neil Warnock era for a little while. During that period of time, we were pursuing Thelin, and I think it looked like it wasn't going to happen for a while, and then it came back around again, and it did. I think we were very generous to both Thelin and to Elfsborg by allowing him to stay at Elfsborg until basically their summer break in Swedish football. He then took 2 weeks off, which is absolutely his want, but it meant that, he wasn't in the door at Pittodrie until first week of June, I think it was, maybe the middle of June, when the team returned for pre-season. So he's not had a lot of time really to really get in the door and really understand the squad of players that he's got at his disposal. So I think what we have certainly seen from him in the Premier Sports group stage in particular is him trying to feel out amongst the squad that was left. And we have a lot of players who are under contract for a period of time who haven't really shown an awful lot, to be fair, since they've come in the door. I think he's, and probably rightly so, given everybody a clean slate of paper, shall I say, to start with, and see what he can get out of them. Now, that has its potential benefits in that we maybe don't need to dip into the transfer market for players in areas we potentially thought we were going to have to. But I think in some areas, I think a lot of Aberdeen fans have probably seen enough from certain players that they don't feel they're going to be good enough anyway. So, are we just delaying the inevitable here? And do we end up just being a little bit behind the curve in terms of where we maybe should be as a squad come the end of the transfer window, for example? So we'll have to wait and see on that one. In terms of Thelin himself, I mean, he comes across, he's incredibly calm, incredibly polite. I think he's going to be very, very dull for the Scottish media landscape. I don't think that a lot of the kind of pundits and stuff are going to really like him because he doesn't give a lot away. But I'm kind of fine with that after having suffered the Neil Warnock stuff last year. He also probably arrived, and he's probably the most pored over manager in Aberdeen's history, in the sense of we had such a long period of time before he arrived. I can't tell you the number of Elfsborg games I watched during that period, knowing he was arriving at Aberdeen, just to try and get a hint of what we could potentially expect to see. And I should put out that a couple of us on our podcast had actually tipped Thelin for the job when Barry Robson got it the first time around. So we were a little bit ahead of the curve on that one as well, potentially. But he's got a very interesting style. Well, at Elfsborg, he certainly did. It's not, particularly reliant on having possession. There's a lot of high energy pressing high up the park, looking really to try and win the ball in the opposition half and quickly turn that over into goal scoring opportunities. That's what his Elfsborg side were excellent at. And I think if you go back and look at some of the stats for Elfsborg played, they played towards the back end. It was Malmo, just at the start of the season. And they won that game 3 or 4-0, I think it was, but with about 12% possession or something daft like that. Like, they barely touched the ball, but absolutely just romped it. And I think we're starting to see signs of that now as well. You can see it Monday night, the second goal in particular, where we win the ball high up the park through Morris. it's a really good move. Just, one touch play into Sokler, lay off into Hilton and Nielsen, the third man run, McGrath then coming in. It's a wonderful goal. And I think that's the kind of thing that we're hoping as Aberdeen fans to start to see, is that type of attacking play, that type of excitement, but also a team that's playing with a bit of identity. We've not had that since, well, for a long time, to be honest. I mean, even in the latter period, Derek McInnes's time at Aberdeen, there wasn't really a identifiable structure and setup for the team, other than it was going to be a 4-2-3-1 and it was going to be these players. Stephen Glass came in and had a philosophy, but it never really worked. Jim Goodwin was just a panic move by the club all round. Robson was Robson, but then the last 6-7 months of the Robson, you could just see it was aimless long balls. Warnock was a farce. Peter Leven was good. So as a football club and as a support base, I think we are just crying out for a level of identity. This is what this football club does. This is what we're going to be about. So I think from that perspective, Monday night in particular was very, very encouraging in the performance at St Johnstone.
Yeah, and I mean, you touched on it there, saying Jimmy Thalin's sides don't need a lot of the ball. And it's not the be-all and end-all of performances and positions in Scottish football, but performances and results against the old firm sides are very important for teams who are competing in third, and Aberdeen will want to be there or thereabouts this season. Do you think that being able to play with less of the ball, counter quite quickly, and kind of score goals is very much in your favour when you come to face the big two?
And this is going to be the interesting dynamic for Thelin to have to deal with and have to get to grips with at Aberdeen, I think, is that, with the exception of Rangers and Celtic, nobody comes to Pittodrie and dominates the ball. Nobody comes to Pittodrie and tries to do that. Even Hearts last season, when they came here, they went 1-0 up. They tried to shut the game down at that point. They weren't coming here trying to win the game, it didn't feel like. So Thelein's going to have to deal with how does he sit up against teams who come to Pittodrie, for example, and just sit with a really low block and just sit in and make it really difficult for us. That's something Aberdeen have struggled with a lot in recent years. The flip side to that, of course, as you say, is if it means, though, potentially on the road, and if it means against the likes of Rangers and Celtic, and you look at Thelein's record in Sweden with Elfsborg when he played the big boys, if he can translate that into a setup that works against the big boys, it means we can, regularly take points off of them, then that's a potential recipe for really good success, hopefully. So, it's going to be interesting to see how we go.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, that of the two, I mean, Rangers already, like you say there, not many teams do come to Pittodrie and try and dominate the ball. And in recent years, Rangers have really struggled there. But it's kind of been the Celtic that has maybe pulled away from Aberdeen and seems to kind of just be a bit too easy for them. So Jimmy will have dealt with something similar in Malmo, who seem to win the league every year it happens in Sweden. So, and I mean, they pushed them very close with Elfsborg. So yeah, I mean, I guess for him, he's not going to be looking at them as the big two. He's going to be looking at them as one is Rangers and one is Celtic, and this is a chance for more points on the board.
Absolutely, I think so. I mean, this is one of the benefits I think we do get out of bringing a manager in from outside the bubble, is that hopefully he arrives here with no real preconceived notions about anything in our league. I think, though, at the same time, there's benefit in us having retained the likes of Peter Leven within the setup, more just for it's those little quirks within Scottish football, that you can identify and feed into the managers, daft stuff like the slope at Tannadice, for example. All these little things that no one's going to be aware of, but it's something that can just help in a certain way, just in terms of how you decide to set up, how you start a game, all that kind of good stuff. What you should expect from the crowd. Are they going to be right on top? Is it going to be atmospheric? Is it not? Whatever, So I think those things with leaving are helpful, but I do think, I've been crying out for, I don't know how long, about picking a guy from outside the Scottish football landscape and give them a crack at it. I think too often in this country we just default into these guys who've been on the merry-go-round too often, and you just end up with the same all the time. So I'm very interested to see how he goes with that. And like I say, hopefully he comes in with a real mindset of, we'll respect every single team that we play, but we're going to go into every single game thinking that we can win it. And if he can adopt that mindset and get the support buying into that, then he's on to a winner already.
Yeah, and in terms of identifying his style and identifying his kind of own players, he has already made quite a few signings, and almost under the radar signings for Aberdeen, because it seems to be pieces of businesses that are getting over the line as soon as they're mentioned. I mean, probably the standout is Dimitar Mitov, because that was a big problem for Aberdeen last season, the position goalkeeper. And I mean, he was an absolute standout for a struggling St. Johnstone side who, now they've lost him, look like they'll probably struggle even more. But he's not just brought in him. I mean, he's brought in Severt. I'm going to mess up some of these names here, but let's give him a go. Is it Severt Heltne Nielsen?
Yep.
A close effort. Peter Ambrose, Gavin Malloy, and of course Ante Palaversa. And then, of course, now being linked with the young winger. That again, this is why can't he just sign players with easy names to say? Topi Keskinen. So a lot of new faces in at Aberdeen, but it doesn't seem to be a problem so far, anyways, in terms of keeping the structure and getting it over. But how welcome are kind of quality additions rather than just quantity?
The quality element's huge. I mean, we've got the squad's looking pretty threadbare at the moment because we've got injuries to Leighton Clarkson and to Dante Polvara, who are going to both miss 8 to 12 weeks. So that's a massive gap, obviously, there in the midfield. Bojan Miovski's clearly going to be departing probably in the next few days, I would imagine, to Girona, it would appear. So the squad's getting stretched already. We've also got an absent Duke, who's currently still sunning and feeding himself, I think, on a beach in Portugal somewhere. So there is definitely limitations within the squad as it stands. The other thing as well is that Thelin likes to play with wingers. That's been pretty evident so far. Barry Robson made it a point not to sign any wingers at all. So we have a squad which is incredibly thin when it comes to players in the wide areas. So it's no surprise to me now to see that Topi Keskinen that we're being linked with today, and I think that will happen over the course of the weekend. That's an out-and-out winger joining the club. That's a much-needed bonus because we've got guys like Shayden Morris who flatters to deceive, but he's got another couple of years in his contract to run. Same with Vicente Bejauen, who's not really had it looking for the last 18 months either, but he still also has 2 years in his contract to run. So we need quality, obviously. We also probably do need quantity at the same time, to be honest, because the squad does look really light. I think within the players we've signed as well, Peter Ambrose kind of jumps out as being a bit of a project player, I think. He looks very, very raw. I think he's one there that we're trying to develop and see what we can do with him. Gav Malloy probably sits in that category as well, but he's been put straight into the first team, playing on the left-hand side of the back four. The left-hand side of the centre-half pair in the back four. And so far, he's done pretty well. And, Mitov, like you say, what a signing that is for less than 200 grand, I think we picked him up for. That's an incredible piece of business. And yeah, as you say, what's been interesting this season as well from Aberdeen's perspective is a lot of our business has been done in the shadows. There's not been a lot of leaks come out of the club about who we're looking for, which is really rubbish for podcasts like us that love to get into the whole speculation piece, but fine, it is what it is. But it's cool when you just suddenly get we've just signed somebody. So and I've got no idea who this guy is, like the Ante Palaversa one yesterday. And I don't know the last time Aberdeen signed a player who had been signed by Manchester City for €7 million just a matter of years ago. So that looks like it could be a pretty impressive piece of business. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, I don't want to be too negative, but it is very Scottish football to do so. So I'm gonna give you a kind of hypothetical situation here and say if Jimmy Thelin was to be a massive failure, so you can touch wood or whatever, but if that was to happen and things were to go pretty poor for Aberdeen and he was to be shown the door kind of early on, I don't think that's going to happen. I think one, he'll be given time for a project, and two, it's looking pretty positive anyways. But if that was to happen, would it be a worry for you though that quite a few faces have come through the door and it is kind of a niche? They're not, in many ways, people would say a lot of these guys aren't familiar to our game, as they call it.
Yes and no. I think since Dave Cormack came in and since he's really had a proper chance to really run things, we've really overhauled the way in which we want to do our transfer business anyway. Like, we're very clearly going in the Moneyball direction, where we've completely expanded our scouting network beyond what we've ever had before. So we're clearly out there in markets that we were never in attempting to identify players at relatively low value that we feel we can bring in, but show a certain level of promise in whatever area it is, that we can get the best out of for a couple of seasons, and then hopefully spin them around for profit. And the best example of that is clearly Bojan Miovski, who arrived at Aberdeen 2 seasons ago from MTK Budapest, a team who'd been relegated from the Hungarian top flight. He'd only scored 9 goals that season, I think, but the data analysts and the scouting team had seen something in him that they liked. And I think it was more to do with goal contributions. He had, I think, the second highest goal contribution tally in the Hungarian league that season, in a team that was really underperforming at MTK. Managed to get a deal done for him, which was below market value because MTK had been relegated, so they were in fire sale mode. But the whole idea of the Miovski deal was obviously he signs a 4-year contract. If he comes in and knocks out the park, then we sell him after 2, and that's what we're going to do. And I think we paid 350 grand for Miovski. Well, I don't know what the final tally will be. Hopefully, it's nothing less than 8 million, that sort of number. That's an incredible bit of business for a club like Aberdeen to be doing. So, while there's that element about, okay, you're bringing a bunch of guys who are not, familiar with the game and all that kind of stuff here, we're doing that anyway at the moment, and we've had mixed success with that, and you're always going to have mixed success with that when you try and attempt it. But I don't think we'll move away from that model, to be honest. And it doesn't really worry me. I think we've seen enough out of a number of the acquisitions we've taken in over the last couple of seasons to go, you know what, if you get a success rate, which is, even like 50-50, you'll probably be doing okay. I think the key thing now for Aberdeen fans is never to really get too hung up or fall in love too much with any players that come through the door these days, because there's a good chance they won't be around for too long.
Yeah, let's just keep all the negativity in one section then. We'll go on Mr. AWOL himself, Duke, who has decided that he is no longer an Aberdeen player himself, and instead, as you mentioned, a beach model. So what is the likely outcome for the Duke situation? I mean, obviously he's a want away, and there's probably no chance of seeing him in an Aberdeen top again. But how is this resolved?
I don't really know, to be honest. I think it's an interesting one for Thelin to have to deal with straight away. On one hand, it's not that big an issue because he never had him here as a player anyway. So he's not someone he knows. It's not someone he's familiar with. It's not someone who's had to deal with. So he can probably just treat it as like a background noise thing, and he's not really getting involved with it. And he'll just let the club deal with whatever the club's going to do with it. Where it might become a challenge is if this goes on till the end of the transfer window, and we decide, well, we're still going to hold you to your contract. We're not going to just rip it up and let you become a free agent. And he then suddenly appears again. Thelин's all about the squad, and he's all about the team, and he's all about the club, and no one's going to be bigger than the club. Does he even then bring a guy like that back into the fold? Does he allow him to integrate back into the team? What sort of messages does that then send to the other players in the team, or does he just kind of freeze them out? It's that'll be an interesting piece if that happens. In terms of what goes on, I don't know. I mean, I'm in 2 schools of thought with this one, because part of me is just like, right, they should just, as soon as somebody wants to offer some cash, just get rid, let him go, just whatever. The other part of me is just like, you know what, hold him to his contract. He's got a year left to run. Duke's he's probably not the most professional of players, in the sense of he came back from pre-season last season pretty overweight. It didn't really look like he'd really put in the time over the close season to keep himself in tip-top condition, and then we kind of saw that throughout the course of last season. He never really produced the level of consistency that we've seen from him in the last 6 months of his time in the first season we had him. I would then think that you're in a position where the guy's probably ruining his career at that point, because I don't think other teams are going to want to pick him up. I can't imagine what sort of condition he would be in to turn up at another club anyway at that point. And there's an element there about, sending a message out to our existing players, but also future players for Aberdeen that, we're not going to be messed about like that. And I think the thing for me, I think is the most disappointing, is that Duke's first season here, in particular the last 6-7 months, the guy was walking on water as far as Aberdeen fans were concerned. Some of the goals he was scoring were outrageous. He was a real talisman for us in that period of the season. Did a clean sweep at the Player Awards dinner, Player of the Year, Young Player of the Year, Goal of the Season, the lot. And it's just really disappointing that it's worked out this way. But then I'd also counter that and just say, look at the complete difference between the attitude and the demeanour between Duke and then Miovski. Miovski knows he's going to move this summer. He effectively did all his farewells and stuff at the end of last season. You saw it in our last home game against Livingston. It felt like that's the last time we'll see him. Clearly, things have taken a little bit longer in terms of the summer window just to get over the line, and maybe that's just natural because the Euros were on and everything. So everything just seems to have taken a bit longer. But he arrived back for pre-season when he was expected to arrive back for pre-season. He's knocked his pan in pre-season. He's done what he was, everything that's been asked of him. The manager kept him out the firing line a bit through the League Cup group stages, I think, just in case something did happen. But then as soon as we needed him on Monday night, straight back in the team, put in a wonderful performance. And even today, like we all know the club. We all know that he's agreed personal terms with Girona. We know that's a thing that's happened. We know that the club and Girona are just trying to thrash out what the final fee will be and the structure will be. But he's been at training today. Looks like he's having a great time in training. Posting on Instagram tonight with images of him with Graham Shinnie, having a great time. Just being really professional about the whole thing and knowing he's going to get his move, but not, treating the club with any sort of disrespect. And it's just like, I feel like Duke should just be looking at that and being like, that's how you act in this situation, Miovski's going to leave Aberdeen now with the well wishes of every single Aberdeen supporter that's had the pleasure of watching him for the last 2 seasons. Duke's going to be a footnote in kind of history now at this point, and most people I think will be quite glad just to see the whole thing finish up.
Yeah, I think you raised some great points about Bojan Miovski there, and so we'll just get on to him. What is the kind of answer you say? I mean, it's almost 100% clear now, or it's very clear, anyways, that he will be leaving Pittodrie this window, and it is going in a very kind of professional way. But what is the kind of replacement for him? Is there somebody in the structure already, or is it about, right, okay, he's gone, we've got a little bit of cash now, let's go and see if we can get the next Bojan Miovski?
I think that's going to be the interesting thing to watch for us. I think we are opening the wallet for Tope Keskinen. I think, we're talking about spending just over €1 million for him. Not quite breaking our transfer record, but not far off of it. That's a lot of money for us to spend. Even in recent seasons where we have been spending money, we've never really breached the kind of £350,000, £400,000 mark. So this is a huge step for us just to go and invest money in Keskinen. Now he's a left winger, so it's not a replacement for Miovski. I think that when we signed Esther Sokler last season, that was with a view to giving him 12 months to kind of get in the door, get used to kind of Scottish football, and then he would be the natural replacement for Miovski, not just because he looks like him. And we keep on suggesting that the club should just pack off whoever it is that we sign. Whoever it is that signs Miovski, that we should just put Sokler over to them and hope that they just assume that's who they've got, and then we can keep Miovski instead. Sokler's, he's no Miovski, put it that way, but then it's such a high bar to try and clear. I think that Sokler in the right team with the right sort of service will score goals, especially in the Scottish League. I think he'll do it, but he's not going to score the type of goals that Miovski does, and I don't think he's going to score as consistently as Miovski does. Anyone that watched the game on Monday night against St Johnstone, you saw, there was 2 instances where Sokler was put through one-on-one with the goalkeeper. One was called back for offside, where he did take it around the keeper and finished it, but he looked a bit hesitant when he was taking it around the goalkeeper. It just didn't look clinical. And there was the one where he missed it, where the keeper just, to be fair, it's a good save by the keeper. If Sokler just lifts it a touch, it's in. So Sokler's probably not for me. Like, I'm not happy going into the season with Sokler as my number 9. And I don't think we've really got anyone else at the moment. Like I say, we've brought Peter Ambrose in over the summer, who's, I think, a project player more than anything else. At this moment in time, we'll see how he goes. Papi Habib Gay's come back from his loan spell at Kristiansund, and I'm not sure about him at all, to be honest. So I do think that if we rake in the sort of cash that we think we're going to be taking in from Miovski, some of it's going to have to be invested. And I'd love to see us invest a decent amount in a proven striker. Maybe we could buy Lawrence Shankland. Maybe that's what we could do.
I'm sure that will rile a few people up. Okay, let's get on to the season then. I mean, there's not much left to say. I mean, you've said already so much so brilliantly. Expectations for this season have got to be high. I mean, there's a bit of positivity in the Northeast that has probably been lacking in the last couple of years. Although there's been hopes, it's not kind of been the same as this. And I wonder if it's because it's a new face to Scottish football. And but what kind of are you expecting from this season? Is this a let's go for third and challenge Hearts for that, or is it let's just make sure we're back in Europe and maybe get a decent cup run or two and put our name on a piece of silverware?
I think it's interesting. If you listen to Thelin talks very much about the project and it being a 3-year project. And I think while that's encouraging to think you've got a manager who's got that real kind of like medium-term, long-term view about what we're trying to do, I think it's great. But at the same time, we all know that football's a results business. And I do fear that if he does suffer a run of games, for example, where we just aren't picking up results in particular, that the pressure grows and then does it become just that snowball effect. And before you know it, you're back in that same position again where you're looking at having to change out a manager. He's been very, very vocal with the support about the need for patience. And I think that's right. But at the same time, football's a results business. And we saw it at halftime against Airdrie in his first ever game at Pittodrie when we went in 1-0 down at halftime and the team got booed off. And without even having played that badly, to be honest, at that point. So I think he realizes the scale of the task at hand in the sense of he knows he needs to find a way to win games while we're still trying to implement his style, his methods, what he wants to do. So from that perspective, it makes this season a bit of a weird one to try and judge about what we should or shouldn't be doing. I mean, my personal view is with the budget we have in hand, we should be finishing in the top 4 every single season because ultimately, usually budgets dictate where you finish in the league. Ultimately, I think, and I'm probably going to get mugged off for this, but I think Kilmarnock will be worse this season than they were last year, or I don't think they'll be as successful as they were. I've got a funny feeling St Mirren might be in the similar boat. So I think there's an opportunity there for a team to get back up the table. Hearts are going to have to deal with the European football stuff again, and there's more games for them to have to deal with this season. And I know that everybody's like raving about their recruitment. I'm not convinced by some of the recruitment. I know they've got lots of depth in their squad, but I look at their squad across the piece now, I kind of tend to look at it and go, there's not many of those players I would swap out for ours. And I didn't think they were that good against Rangers at the weekend. I thought both teams looked pretty poor, to be honest. That's just me. So I look at that and I go, third's up for grabs. I also actually think second's up for grabs because I don't think Rangers look in any way, shape, or form a particularly good side this year at all. So I do think if somebody could get their act together and really try and get up the table, then there's an opportunity there as well. But it's a long way of me saying I don't really know where we'll be. I think for us, I don't want to say top 6. I think try to say top 6 is almost like shooting at failure to begin with. So I think at least if we could finish top 4 and get ourselves back in Europe, I think that would be a good season. And then if we could get to put some silverware back in the boardroom. It's been far too long since the Scottish Cup was back in Aberdeen. So if we could make that happen this year, I'd be a very happy man.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. My next question was going to be if you could choose one of the two, which one would it be? Okay, and yeah, so although you're saying the Scottish Cup, the League Cup is another chance to kind of go quite far anyways with the draw for the next round. You've got the home tie against Queen's Park. You'll obviously be expecting to win that, and it is kind of the first competition. They kind of put the stamp down, show whose foot is in the door in Scottish football, and is that a chance for Jimmy Thelin to go, hi, hello, take me serious. I'm here, and this is not going to be my only piece.
I think so. I mean, ultimately, the great thing about the way the League Cup is structured now is, of course, if you get off to a flyer at the start of the season, then you've got that chance. Long gone are the days now where the League Cup extended from this time of year right the way through to March. So that's a really good thing about the League Cup structure. And again, we've lucked out a bit in terms of our draw in the second round because we've picked up Queen's Park. We could have picked up one of the again, I'll probably get slaughtered for this if we lose next week, but you like to think we'll win this game. We could have picked up one of the kind of higher ranked teams who were unseeded in the draw. So from that perspective, it's absolutely a good draw. The one thing I would caveat that bit with is I think that every Premiership team made it through the groups, I think. I'm right in thinking. Pretty certain about that. I'll have to check it out, but I'm pretty certain every Premiership team did come through the group. So chances are you're going to have a last 8, which is full of Premiership teams. And then you're kind of in that lap of the gods in terms of potentially where your draw is. We've been fortunate, I think, in the last couple of seasons in the League Cup with our draws from that perspective. Because I think season before last where we made it to the semi-final. We had Annan in the second round, and we had Park Thistle, who I think, so it was the two lowest ranked teams we could have possibly got in those rounds. And then last season, I'm struggling to think who we drew in the quarterfinals now, but it doesn't really matter. It's an opportunity definitely for Thelin to try and get off the flyer. I mean, if he can come in the door and win the first trophy that's an offer to him, then the treble's well and truly on at that point.
And you start the season with, well, you started the season with 3 points against St. Johnstone. Now first home match in the league with St. Mirren. I mean, I think it's followed up by another against Kilmarnock. Then you've got Ross County and Motherwell. Sorry, you are Aberdeen, which make up the first 5. How many points do you expect to get from that? Because there's not, one of the kind of the top 4 from last season.
Yeah.
So is this let's go and are you aiming for 15, 13? What's the kind of points you want on the board after the 5?
That's the interesting part. So when the fixtures came out, I remember saying to my 2 co-hosts on the show, if you were handpicking a set of fixtures for Thelin to have for his first round of games, that's about as good as you can get, because it gave him a real chance to get a run going. The flip side to that, of course, is then if you don't win a lot of these games, then things look very different all of a sudden, because you've kind of, I don't want to call them easier games, but those have gone. So I think for Thelin to maintain the goodwill, the positivity, the momentum, and for us to have a shot at finishing third, I think we need to take like between 12 and 15 points out of those opening 5 games. I don't think there's anything for us to fear per se in those games. I think we get fortunate to a certain extent because of the fact that St Mirren have been our bogey side for the last few seasons, particularly in Paisley, but they did an absolute number on us at Pittodrie last season as well, and have done actually in the last 2 years. But we perhaps got a little bit fortunate because they come up to Pittodrie off the back of the game they had on Thursday night against Bran, where they kind of got ragdolled a little bit, I think it's probably fair to say. And so do they arrive at Pittodrie just a little bit? They'll be on a high because obviously they get the last minute equaliser, but is there a bit of tiredness in the legs? They're not the biggest of squads. So it'll be interesting to see how they come up here and play. Queen's Park then gives us an opportunity to get hopefully another win on the door. And then, Kilmarnock, I touched on it earlier on, I don't think Killie will be as effective as they were last season. And that gives us another good opportunity. So yeah, I think 12 to 15 points would be fair. And it would give us a really good start to the season if that was the case.
Yeah, okay. Well, we'll round this off then with a prediction. We're recording this on the Friday night. On Sunday, you take on St Mirren. What is the score going to be, Gary?
I think I said in our show the other night, 2-1 Aberdeen, so I'll stick with that, 2-1 Aberdeen.
Perfect. Okay, well, yeah, thank you very much for joining me on Salmon's Pizzeria today. Where can the Aberdeen fans find you if they do live under a rock and haven't found you already?
If you've not already, you'll find us on Twitter at ABZ Podcast, or you'll find us on any of your usual podcast haunts, good ones, bad ones, and different ones. If you just search for ABZ Football Podcast, we should hopefully be lurking in there somewhere, and there's a load of nonsense to get through, so fill your boots.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you very much for joining me on tonight's show. I hope you enjoyed the pizzeria. I certainly have enjoyed the chat. Please leave a like and a comment saying where you think Aberdeen are going to finish this season, and if you think Jimmy Thelin will be a success. But for now, that is all. And yeah, I really do hope everybody enjoyed, and I look forward to seeing you guys next time.